Strides. The district court in Merced County is now in session. The Honorable Judge Adrian is to preside.
Thank you for standing by that, please.
We are convened in State of Iowa versus Mark Straka, case number AGCR 012597. Today is a date and time set for trial in this matter. Present in the courtroom representing the State of Iowa is County Attorney Ben Smith. Chuck Schulte is present representing the defendant. Mr. Schulte is the person seated to your right, the defendant, Mark Straka.
Yes, Your Honor.
The court file reflects, Mr. Schulte, that on January 21st, 2015, your client and you appeared in front of me and executed a waiver of a jury trial after I explained to him his rights on the record. Is your client revoking, or is he still requesting a non-jury trial in this
He
matter?
is still requesting a non-jury trial.
Is that true, Mr. Straka?
It is.
Right, is the state ready to proceed?
It is, Your Honor.
Is the defendant ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Right, Mr. Smith, I hear any opening statement, otherwise call your first witness.
State waive opening, Your Honor. At this time, the state will call Sue Hanson to the stand.
Right, please come forward. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You do.
Go ahead and have a seat.
Can you state your first and last name and then spell them for the record?
Sue Henson, S-U-E-H-E-N-S-O-N,
And Sue, where do you live?
3245 240th Street, Sac City.
And where is that in relationship to Sac City?
About 4 miles east on 196.
So is it a rural residence?
Yes, it's an acreage.
How long have you lived at that location?
We moved in March of 2014.
And you say we, who
My
else?
husband and my daughter.
Okay. And do you know the defendant, Mark Straka?
Not personally, he's a neighbor across the road.
Okay. How long has he been a neighbor across the road?
He lived there when we moved in, so since March of 2014.
Ms. Hanson, I want to turn your attention to July 3rd of 2014. Did you encounter or have an interaction with Mark Straka on that day?
Yes, when he shot my dog.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
These are duplicates. I'm not asking you to pull these out, just keep them there for
Okay.
reference. You got those. Sue, I'm going to ask you to grab State's Exhibit 1, the photograph marked State's Exhibit 1. Can you tell the judge what that's a picture of?
The place on the top is my residence, and the place on the bottom is where Mr. Straka lives.
And the orange arrows identifying the residence, those are placed in the appropriate position pointing towards your residence and his?
Yes,
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of what the properties would look like from the sky?
yes.
Now, if you could look at State's Exhibit 1, or excuse me, State's Exhibit 2, and tell the judge what that picture is of.
That is my daughter and my 2 dogs.
What are the dog's names?
The black dog, his name is Bo, and the little rat terrier is Belle.
Now, when this picture was taken, how old was Bo and the other one?
Bo is 5 and Belle is 2.
Okay. And what are their respective breeds?
Bo is a black lab, and Belle is rat terrier, blue heeler mix.
Have you had them since they were puppies?
Yes,
And the gal in the picture, did you identify her?
that's my daughter Amanda.
What's Amanda's last name?
Thies, Thies.
And how old was Amanda on or around July 3rd of 2014?
13.
You could grab State's Exhibit 3. Can you tell the court what this picture's of?
That is my daughter Amanda again with our 2 horses
Okay. And where do those horses, where do they bed at?
in our barn.
And is that a barn located on your rural Sac residence?
Yes, be this building right back here.
Okay, so you're pointing, you've grabbed State's Exhibit 1, and you're pointing at the property marked Sue Hansen residence?
Correct,
Okay. And it's the barn on that property?
right.
You testified that you know Mark Straka because he shot your dog, but if you could, go back to how that encounter happened. What were you doing? Who were you with?
My daughter Amanda and I were out. We took the horses out and were riding down the road. We rode approximately 2 miles down, turned around and came back. Both our dogs were with us. We got it. Going back home, we got it a little further. The dogs kind of, were sniffing around and ran down into the ditch a little ways. And we come up and Mr. Straka was standing out on his front step and shot my small dog. And
Can you grab State's Exhibit 4, what's been marked as State's Exhibit 4? Can you tell the court what that is?
that's the picture of the section around my home, and the yellow line is the way we rode horse that day.
And you indicated that you had gone, which would be east,
Correct,
and then jotted north a section,
right,
and then came back the same way to return home.
yes.
And if you can grab State's Exhibit 5 and tell the court what that is.
And my daughter was taking pictures on her cell phone as we were going down the road.
So is this State's Exhibit 5 a photograph of the actual day?
Yes, that was as we was riding.
Okay. And if you could grab State's Exhibit 6 and tell the court what that is a picture of.
That's Mr. Straka's house with the gravel road that we were riding on.
Okay, I see that orange, the fat orange line.
Mm-hmm.
You had indicated that around this time, Mr. Straka had shot one of your 2 dogs.
Correct.
Now, is that orange, big fat orange arrow pointing westward, is that the approximate area at which your dogs were fired upon?
Yes,
And when you were returning home, because this incident occurred on your return trip home, right?
correct.
Where were the dogs at in relationship to you? If this orange arrow, big fat orange arrow represents, you and your daughter and your 2 horses, where at on the arrow were your dogs at when you state Mr. Straka shot them?
No, and right
Can you hold that up, if you would?
right up out in there.
Are you identifying right around the pointy part of the fat arrow?
Well, it'd be the smaller arrow right here. We were out here where this arrow is, it's where we were on the horse on the road.
Okay, so the smaller, thinner arrow that's pointing northward is where dogs were at when they were allegedly shot?
Correct.
Okay. And about how far off that gravel road into Mr. Straka's property were the dogs when he fired upon them?
2 or 3 feet.
How did you know the dogs were shot?
The dog that was shot yelped, and she was bleeding.
And at the time that your dog yelped, did you know where Mr. Straka was at?
Guy was standing on his front step with a gun,
Do you know what kind of gun?
a high-powered pellet gun. It was a rifle type gun.
Was it a pistol type gun? It was
No,
a rifle type
It was
gun?
a rifle.
Okay, and where was he at in relationship to the residence, his residence, as identified in State's Exhibit 6?
Would have been on the east side of his house, on his steps by the door.
Did he say anything to you after this happened?
After I yelled or asked him what he was doing, that he shot my dog, he said, "That's what they get if they come on my property."
Can you describe the general demeanor of your dogs to the court?
Couple of big babies. They're loving dogs. They're both inside dogs. They go outside when we go outside. They love kids.
And before this date, had you ever observed your 2 dogs on Mr. Straka's property?
No,
Did Mr. Straka say anything to you before he fired the shot?
no.
You could grab State's Exhibit 7 and tell the court what that is.
That's the right side of my dog where the gunshot wound is.
And I'm sorry, the name of the dog again is
Bell.
Bell. And is the red the blood that was coming from the dog?
Yes.
Were you able to observe what the projectile was at this time? In other words, could you see the pellet or the BB?
No, the pellet is actually still in her.
Okay. And this photograph, State's Exhibit 7, was that taken how long after the shot of the yelp?
That was taken after we arrived back from the veterinary.
That was after you got back from the vet?
Correct.
Okay. What did this wound look like before you had taken?
It was a lot more bloodier. She was losing a lot of blood. She was leaving puddles of blood like this in the driveway and on the roadway.
So after this, Mr. Straka fired at your dog, or dogs, what did you do then?
Right after he fired,
Yeah.
well, like I said, I yelled at him that he just shot my dog. My daughter was making this, all the excitement was causing the horses to start getting a little excited, so we got back in the driveway, and I had my phone on me, so I was calling 911 to the sheriff's department as I pulled in the driveway and asked for a deputy.
And did the sheriff's department eventually arrive?
Yes,
How long after you made the call?
10, 15 minutes probably.
And did you provide the sheriff's office with a statement?
Yes,
Did the sheriff deputy, do you recall his name?
Officer Kudebeck.
Do you recall whether he spoke to defendant?
I believe so.
Do you recall whether Deputy Kudebeck observed the injury on Bell?
Yes, he did.
prior to this incident, had Mr. Straka ever said anything to you about dogs coming onto his property?
No, I've never spoken to him.
And after Deputy Cuddebeck had come, at some point in time, did you take Belle to the vet?
Yes, as soon as the officer left, I took her into the vet clinic.
Can you grab State's Exhibit 8? Can you tell the court what that is?
That is the receipt from the visit from when I took Belle in to see the vet after she was shot.
And I think you had stated something about it earlier, but did you ever learn exactly what it was that was lodged in Belle?
A pellet from a high-powered pellet gun.
Do you recall, I'm gonna go back to when you first mounted your horses and you started heading east down the gravel road that runs by your home. Did you see Mr. Straka on the way to when you first started the trip?
No,
And just for the record, can you identify whether Mr. Straka is here in the courtroom today?
yes,
And where's Mr. Straka at?
he's sitting right there.
The record reflect that the witness has pointed in the general direction of Mr. Mark Straka sitting next to his attorney, Charles Schulte.
I didn't see who you pointed at.
Right there.
You're referring to the person in the blue shirt with tie with no jacket?
Correct.
Right, she's identified the defendant.
Is there anything else about this incident that you think may be helpful to the court and come to its determination?
It's just, it was very uncalled for. My dogs were doing nothing wrong. They were out enjoying a ride with my daughter and I.
And how has this affected you and your daughter?
It traumatized my daughter for a while. That was a very scary thing for her to witness.
One second, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor. At this time, though, before the witness leaves, the state would offer exhibits 1 through 8 inclusive.
No objection.
All right, states 1 through 8 are okay.
And I have nothing further.
Mr. Schulte?
Ms. Henson, on Exhibit 6, am I correct that your statement places the dog at about the tip of the skinny arrow?
Correct.
And if you go back to the beginning of the arrow, that would be approximately Mr. Straka's porch?
Correct.
Now, it appears, at least from the aerial photo, that there's a lot of vegetation between the end of the arrow where the porch is and the tip of the arrow. Is that accurate? Is there vegetation there?
There's some shrubs and bushes, yes.
Were you ever off the roadway, or did you and the horse stay on the roadway?
No, we were always on the roadway.
But you admit the dog went off the roadway
A little ways, yes.
and in toward Mr. Straka's house?
Yes.
Did the dog go through shrubs and other types of vegetation?
No.
How far again would you estimate the dog was onto Mr. Straka's property?
2 or 3 feet the most.
And approximately where again was the dog when you say he was shot? Is it a he or a she?
She,
Okay, when she was shot, where was she?
approximately 2 or 3 feet in his yard, off the ditch.
Okay, so about, what, was she through the ditch?
Yes.
Onto his yard. After she was shot, what did she do?
She yelped.
Did she run back onto the road?
She wasn't running, she was walking slowly, as she was bleeding from the side.
Did she come back to you?
Yes,
And at that point, you called the sheriff's department?
yes, I did.
And then did you and, was it Bill, go home?
Yes,
And you waited for the sheriff's department?
correct.
And you gave a statement to the sheriff?
Yes.
And after all that was over, how long do you suppose you had spent talking to the sheriff, calling the sheriff, waiting for the sheriff? How much time had gone past before you were done talking to the sheriff?
20, 25 minutes from the time she was shot till I took her to the vet.
Okay, so then it's 25 minutes after she's shot, and then you decided to take her to the vet.
Yes,
Okay. Now, on Exhibit 8, this is the receipt you got from the Animal Health Center here in Sac City, is that correct?
correct.
It appears that Bill saw Dr. Nagel that day,
Yes,
and you get charged $10 for an office call. He does a physical exam and charges you $25. He really hits you for being after hours or on a Sunday with a $50 charge. And then there's, looks like maybe a couple of injections.
correct.
And then the Orvax, I don't know what that is. Is that
It's an antibiotic.
it's an antibiotic? Okay, so was that injected or was that just a?
That was pills for 7 days following.
Okay, bill for 7 days. And the total damage has been, including the $50 for after hours call, was $134.80. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay. And you pay Dr. Nattercola or the Animal Health Center the $134.80, I assume.
Yes,
Did Bill ever have to return for any kind of follow-up?
no,
How is she doing now?
she's doing fine.
Why did you spend 20 minutes dealing with the sheriff's department before you took Bill into the vet?
I had already called the vet and talked to him. He was out of town. He was going to meet me in the office as soon as I was done talking to the officer.
Okay, I don't know if there's questions.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
I think you meant my step. If you just leave those things back. Your next witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Sheriff's Deputy Cutback, Corey Cutback, to the witness stand.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Deputy Cutback, could you state first, your first and last name, and then spell them for the record?
It's Corey, T-O-R-Y, Cutback, C-U-D-A-B-A-C-K.
Deputy Cutback, how long have you been a deputy with Sac County?
4 years.
And prior to working with Sac County, did you work at any other law enforcement agency?
Stormlight PD since 2007.
And before that, did you attend Iowa Law Enforcement Academy?
Correct. Graduated in October of 07.
Deputy Cuddeback, I want to turn your attention to July 3rd of this last year, 2014. Were you on duty that day?
Yes.
Do you recall what shift or what hours you were working?
I was working I believe a day shift, so I wouldn't have got off till 5.
And at some point in that shift period, did dispatch send out a response concerning a 911 call?
Yes.
And what was that?
I was calling to a residence, reference the RP's dog being shot by a neighbor.
Okay, and RP is, what's RP mean?
Reporting party.
Okay. And so, okay, did you go to that area to which you were called?
Correct.
Okay, and was that in Sac County?
Yes.
Okay, there's a number of exhibits in front of you. They're numbered 1 through 8. If you could look at State's Exhibit 1. Does State's Exhibit 1, does that depict the area of the residence to which you were called?
Yes, Sue Henson's residence.
And maybe I'd ask you this, but was this in Sac County?
Yes.
Okay. When you arrived at this location, describe what you saw when you first pulled up.
As I pulled into the driveway, I was met by 2 dogs. I walked up to the house, the dogs let me walk to the house. I petted both dogs. Then as I got up to the porch of the house, that's when Sue and her daughter, I believe, came outside and met with me.
Okay, you take a look at State Exhibit 2.
Yep.
State's Exhibit 2 are the 2 dogs in that picture, the same 2 dogs that you just had stated you encountered when you arrived.
Yes. It appears to be so.
The dogs barking at you, do you recall?
I think they were parked when I was on the roadway, but not as I exited my vehicle.
Okay, and after you spoke with Ms. Henson, did you, what information did Ms. Henson provide you?
She advised that her and her daughter were riding horses.
Objection, you're saying?
I will withdraw the question. At any point in time, did you grab the smaller of the 2 dogs and inspect it for an injury?
Sue showed me the injuries to the dog, and I could see that it was bleeding from its chest.
Okay. And you can take a look at State's Exhibit 7. Would that be a fair and accurate depiction of what the dog wound would have looked like?
Correct, that's what I remember the injuries to be.
And when you said on the chest, where at on the chest?
I don't
Of the dog? Don't recall. Following your interaction with Ms. Henson, did you have occasion to interact with the defendant?
Correct, I went to his residence immediately after.
Okay, and what did you observe when you went to the defendant's residence?
I got there, they were outside working in the yard.
And when you say they, who's they?
Him and his wife, I believe.
And did you ask the defendant about the incident?
Yes.
And what did the defendant say?
The defendant advised that him and his wife were outside working in the yard, which they do regularly. He observed Sue Henson and her daughter ride by on horses. He observed their dogs were following them off the leash. The defendant advised that he's had problems with these dogs coming into his yard before, and that as they went by, he got out his pellet gun to get ready in case the dogs were to come into his yard and attack him or his livestock.
Did you observe any weapons or a pellet gun when you were at the defendant's residence?
Yes, there was one by a small shed barn type structure next to the driveway. It was leaned up against a pole.
Did Mark ask you, did Mark say anything to you about being afraid for himself, his wife, or his property?
Correct. He advised that he was afraid that the dogs would bite him, and that's why he got the pellet gun ready when they first went by the house.
Did Mark state anything to you about having animals on his property or livestock that he was fearful?
Yeah, I believe he had chickens.
Did you observe the chickens on his property?
I did not, but I seen a coop-like structure behind that same shed there.
Okay.
I didn't walk around the shed.
Did you ask Mark whether he had reported the dogs for trespassing before?
Yeah, I asked him, he said he never reported it to us.
But he indicated to you that the dogs had been a problem.
Correct.
And to your knowledge, did Mark Straka call law enforcement that on July 3rd, 2014?
No.
And ultimately, you charged Mark with animal abuse in violation of Iowa Code 717B.2.
Correct.
Before you left, did you have Mark Straka fill out a witness statement?
Yes.
Okay, can you take a look at State's Exhibit 9, please? Can you tell the court what State's Exhibit 9 is?
It's the statement that I had Mark fill out the day of the report.
State would offer its Exhibit 9 into evidence this time.
Mr. Schulte?
Should have been last
I
time.
know I have some. I'm not. Your ordinance, is it?
Yep.
No objection.
State's name is in
And Deputy Cuddebeck, can you identify the defendant, if the defendant is here in the courtroom today, Mr. Mark Straka?
Defendant's right.
Could you do that again while the judge is taking?
Defendant's in front of me by his attorney. Ryan Boucher.
questions for this witness, Your Honor?
Mr. Schulte?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dillon. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you're free to go, deputy. Do you have any further witnesses, Mr. Schulte?
Statement time, Your Honor.
Mr. Schulte, do you have any evidence for grant, or do you want to make any motions at this time?
Your Honor, I'd like to reserve any motions I might make at this time to the end of the evidence, if I could.
All right.
And with that, I'd like to call Mark Straka to the stand.
Sir, would you please come forward? Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you state your name and then spell it?
Sure. My name is Mark Straka, M-A-R-K-S-T-R-A-K-A.
Mr. Straka, where do you live?
3252 240th Street, just northeast of Sac City.
Are you employed?
Yes, with the American Home Shield in Carroll.
How long have you lived at your current address?
We moved in June of 2007.
Can you describe briefly what type of a property or residence it is?
It's what people call an acreage. It's a little bit less than 2 acres. It's an old farmhouse with some land, which we moved here for the purpose of trying to plant an orchard and grow vegetables and things like that. So that's what we've been doing for the past few years.
Now, are you married?
I am. My wife is Lindley. She's she's now a U.S. citizen. She's born in Taiwan.
On July 3rd, 2014, do you recall the incident involving the Henson's dogs?
Clearly.
Can you describe what you were doing just before the incident that was testified to?
Sure. On Exhibit 1, this photograph on our property, to the right-hand northeast side of it, you can see a little square, which is our vegetable garden. We have it fenced off to keep rabbits out of it, and I was working there at the time. You might notice that it has a clear view to the east. And,
Did you look to the east?
well, not until I heard dogs barking, which caught my attention and got me worried.
What did you see when you looked to the east?
I'm not sure how far down the road, not too far to the east though. Within the frame of this picture, I saw 2 horses and 2 dogs coming along, and the dogs were like circling the horses and barking, and they were coming towards us.
Did you recognize the horses or the dogs?
Horses, no. People know, but the dogs we're very familiar with, yes.
Have you had prior difficulties with those dogs?
Numerous times.
For how long have you had difficulties with those dogs?
The first time we found them raiding through the property, and I say raiding because they charge around barking, and this is March and April when it first began to happen.
Outside of running around and barking, were they ever in any way threatening to you or to any of your animals or property?
Yes, when they would come into our property, they would they would charge toward my wife or I, whoever happened to be out there at the time, or both of us, barking in a way that they were showing their teeth at us, and we would always retreat into the house or into one of these garages that we have here.
So the dogs would actually chase you into an outbuilding or into your house?
Yes.
On how many occasions do you think that happened?
I've tried to remember. This happened over the course of 4 months, possibly once every 2 weeks, maybe twice a month.
Do you know who the dogs belong to?
Yes, of course. I could see that they lived across the street.
Did you ever complain to the neighbors across the street about the dogs?
No, because they were always loose in the yard, and whenever we went out our driveway toward the north side, they would immediately start barking and charging towards us. So we were pretty much afraid to show ourselves out the north side of the property.
Have they ever done any damage to you or to your property up to that point?
No.
Now, you stated that you have a vegetable garden there that's fenced in, keep the rabbits out. Are there other animals on the property?
Yes, we have I don't know if you'd call it a flock of chickens. I think we have about a dozen chickens that we let roam around the southeast part of the property, where you might see there's an orchard there.
And you also have an orchard.
We do, yes.
Who takes care of the chickens?
Mostly my wife Lynn, but I help out with it.
And on the day in question, on July 3rd, 2014, were there chickens out in the yard?
Yes.
Explain to the court what happened on July 3rd after you saw the people coming down the road from the east, I gather,
Mhm.
and the dogs were running around the horses. What did you next observe?
Well, then as I said, I thought we were in trouble because I knew I didn't have enough time to get my wife and the chickens and everybody inside before they arrived. It was not all that long of a distance. So I went over, and over inside the front door of the house, I keep this pellet gun, which I've used maybe 2 or 3 times over the years, just to shoot deer, to keep them out of my orchard as it was developing.
Can you describe the pellet gun in a little greater detail?
Well, I don't know much about guns. I never used one before these coming to Iowa, but it's just shaped like a rifle. I got it at Walmart, and it shoots a small pellet.
What propels the pellet?
You have to crank the barrel to get some air pressure in it,
So it's an air gun.
an air gun.
You grab the air gun and then what happened?
Well, I just waited at the side porch, which you really can't see in this picture because it's under the shade of the trees there on the right side of the house, but I just waited at that porch hoping that they would pass by. But as they got to the front, and there's a section of my driveway that you can't see on this picture, the dogs charged into the driveway pretty much as they had always done before. They just took charge, barking toward me. And I waited a long time. I waited until they had come. When I talked to the deputy on that day, I was estimating that it was 40 or 50 feet that they had come in at that point. But since then, my wife and I walked out there and actually measured it. And it's more like 75 feet that they had come in at that point.
Now, I'd like to take you back to Exhibit 6 that you were talking about. That's the one with the 2 orange arrows on it.
Oh, yeah.
And you say there's a driveway there that you really can't see from this picture. Can you be more specific about the location of that driveway?
In the picture, you'll see that the visible driveway comes down and hooks toward the left or toward the west, toward the house. But it actually comes up alongside the house and continues back out to the roadway. So it's an elongated U shape there.
So it actually sort of makes a loop back out.
It does.
Mm-hmm. And it's the shrubbery and the trees that are keeping us in this aerial view from seeing the highway, seeing the driveway,
Well,
is that correct?
if you look at 6 really carefully, you can see it there, but it's shaded out. I think it's just shade that's obscuring it.
But
And also this arrow begins at the front of my house, whereas actually the porch is on the east side. So the arrow's not all that accurately laid.
Okay, so if you were to put the arrow,
It
where
would
would
be-
you put the arrow?
Right at the northeast side of the house, on the east side.
When you're pointing, I have no idea what you're pointing at.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you could show me, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm looking at the photograph that's called State's Exhibit number 6, and you can see my house. It's only my house in this picture, really. And then the arrow seems to begin on the north face of the house. But if it were to be accurate, it would be on the east side of the house that the arrow would begin. Because the door and the porch are on the east side of the house, toward the north. And then it would just run in a more vertical direction. Because you can, if you look carefully, you can make out that lane or that driveway there. But it's pretty shaded out.
Okay, so the dog was it one dog or both dogs?
They were both charging in. I forgot what you call it. The smaller of the 2 was in the lead, and the black one was following. Over the previous months, I've noticed that the smaller one is the more excitable one, more like the leader, and the black one tends to follow it. But I don't know. That's what was happening that day as well. The smaller one was in the lead, the black one was following, and they were doing their barking and charging toward me.
Why did you do that?
Well, I honestly waited as long as possible. I was hoping they would come to a stop, turn around, and leave. But they didn't. They kept on coming. And when the first dog was about within 10 feet of me there, that's when I fired the pellet gun at it to stop it. I was not only thinking of myself in defense, but I knew my wife and the chickens were right behind me there, and I didn't want to let the dogs get past me. And that was
As
it.
that was going on, excuse me, as that was going on, where were the people on the horses?
Sort of between the two driveway mounts. It makes a loop there, and they were sort of on the road between where those two mounts meet the road.
What were they doing?
Well, at first they were shouting very, very loudly to stop the dogs from coming in, but they couldn't do that. So then they just sat on the horses. It all happened very, very quickly. It may sound long, but this whole thing was over in a minute, less than a minute.
After you shot the pellet gun at the dog, what did you do then?
I actually cracked that barrel of the gun because I thought I might have to use it again. I didn't know if I would succeed in stopping them or not, so I was going to get ready to put another pellet in. But as I broke the barrel and looked up, I had noticed that the dogs were already out of sight, out of the driveway. And the people on the horses were just shouting at me that they were going to go call the police.
What did you do then?
Nothing. It was all over as far as I was concerned.
Well, did you attempt to call the police?
I did. I couldn't get through. The line was busy.
You heard Deputy Cutback testify basically as to what you told him. Was that basically accurate?
Yes, what he said is pretty accurate. I would maybe question the timeline, though, because I think it was more like an hour before he actually pulled into my driveway.
Okay.
In the interim, I went back to mowing. I was mowing, well, it doesn't matter where, but I was mowing, and I finished the mowing job and walked out, and even still, he hadn't come in yet. And I wasn't looking at my watch or anything, so I would just say it felt like an hour.
Have you ever, after shooting the pellet gun at the dog, observed the injury to the dog, except maybe on this photograph today?
Oh, no, but I have seen them running around over there. Whenever we go out to get the mail is when that's the only time we can see their place. And I've seen the dogs running around when we go get our mail.
In fact, were the dogs a problem at one point getting the mail?
Oh, yeah, all throughout the previous 4 months. It seemed to me that the dogs were, I don't know, they were on the lookout for us, because even when I tried to get the mail very quietly, I would, I'm not kidding, I would almost like tiptoe out there. And yet, as soon as I came into view of their house, the dogs would start barking. Many times they would start a charge across. It's quite a distance, as you can see in the picture. So they would start a charge and get across, partway across their property there. But on some of those occasions, there was a man at the house who would shout them to a halt. And they would like stop and go back. But there were many other times when nobody was there. And we just had to get our mail and hurry back to the house.
Since this incident on July 3rd passed, have you had any further difficulties with these dogs?
No. They still bark when we get the mail sometimes. Not recently because of the winter weather, but they continued to bark, but they never came after us again.
I have no further questions at this time.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Straka, do you have the permission of Sue Henson or anybody living at that address to fire your BB gun at the dogs?
I did it in self-defense. I didn't think I needed to ask anyone's permission to do that.
So,
And it all happened in less than a minute.
so is that a no?
That is a no.
And you had stated that you had been having difficulties with the dogs is that a yes?
It is.
For 4 months?
Approximately March and April it began, after the snow thawed.
And that's of 2014?
It is, yes, sir.
And you said that occurred once every week or 2 weeks? Or?
We didn't keep a record. At the beginning, of course, I didn't know this was going to be a problem. I thought, oh, the dogs got away from them. They won't let that happen again. I let it go. I forgot about it. But now I can think back on it, and it was maybe once every 2 weeks that they would come.
So 4 months. Divided by 2.
Could it be 8 times that they came raiding through?
approximately?
Yeah, I couldn't say for sure.
And you said raiding is one word you use to describe their actions.
Well, they were running wildly and barking. I don't know what else to call it. They weren't wagging their tails and trying to be friendly with us, ever.
Okay. You said that they were threatening.
Mm. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
You said that they were charging at you and your wife. And
When they came into the property, which they often came through the south side, which I have since fenced off, but in those days, they used to run directly south from their property, go to the east, and then come in our property from the south. It's blocked now, but they would come in and just come charging and barking in and take us by surprise that way.
and they charged at you with their teeth gnashing. You testified.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and they did so to the point where you and your wife had to take cover in your home in defense.
Well, we did. We ducked into the house to avoid trouble with the dogs, right?
Okay, so 38 times, give or take, a couple of times, this happened. You never once called law enforcement.
No.
You were in fear of your life, or you were in fear of being injured. Is that a yes?
It is. Yes, I'm sorry.
In those 38 times, you were in fear of being injured, or your wife being injured, or your property being injured,
Mm.
but you never once contacted law enforcement.
No, that's true, yeah. I've wondered about that. I think, as I said, I kept thinking that, oh, the dogs just got away from him this time.
When did
They
you
wouldn't let it happen again, you know.
When did you purchase the BB gun?
Oh, 7 years ago when we moved here and I started planting fruit trees and the deer would come in and chew the young trees down to nothing. So I got the pellet gun to make these long shots to keep the deer out of the orchard when it was just getting started.
Okay, and you testified that aside from the BB gun, you're not familiar with guns or rifles?
No, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I never had experience with guns before.
But you've had occasion to fire this particular BB gun before this incident, right?
I would say 2 or 3 times over the years when I was able to see the deer. They usually came and did their damage unbeknownst to me, but there were a couple times when I was able to catch them in the act.
So when you fire upon the deer, the dogs, whatever, do you use a pellet or a BB?
Oh, I guess you would call it a pellet. It's a little lead thing, not circular. They have a flat front on them sometimes, and other ones they have a kind of a blunt point.
Sure. Do you recall when you purchased the gun? I know it was some odd years ago, or 7 years prior to this. Do you recall any warnings on the box about the kind of damage that particular weapon could do?
No, I don't recall.
Okay. And when the action on that gun, of the pumping mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
is it, you can pump it as many times as you want?
No, it's a single, you just break the barrel down and put it back and it's ready to go. One pump.
Okay, and then, is it manual reload then?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and so one shot, and after that one shot, you have to reload.
Yes, that's right.
About how far away from the dogs when you fired these shots?
They had come to the point where they were within 10 feet of me.
Okay, did you fire at the other dog also?
No, I didn't have to, no. I fired at the first one and I didn't even look to see the result. I immediately broke the barrel because I thought I might need to do it again. But then when I looked up, I couldn't even see the dogs anymore. They had already retreated out the driveway.
Okay, and you testified that you have chickens.
Yes.
Do you have any other animals?
A couple of cats that we rescued and raised, and they were also out that day.
And in those 38 so odd times that the
Oh, not
dog-
38, no, about 8 times.
8, okay.
Yeah, twice a month roughly for 4 months. And then there were, if I can just add this, there were 2 occasions when they chased my car into my driveway when I was coming home from work and just were outside my car door barking at me, holding me locked in the car for a few minutes.
Okay, but given that, you never contacted law enforcement?
No,
After you were pinned in your own car and you couldn't get out, you didn't contact law enforcement?
no, I did not.
In those 8 or so times that the dogs entered your property, did they ever Did it ever kill any of your animals, injure any of your animals?
No, after the first couple times, this would be April, I imagine, we just naturally got in the habit of looking out the window to see if they were out there before we went out or before we let our chickens out. And there were times when they were out there running and then we didn't go out or we didn't let the chickens out. In fact, we got in the habit of not letting the chickens out at all, and the cats not at all either, because we never knew when they were going to come in. That's probably May, and that's probably when I put the fence around the south property line to stop that line of attack.
No further questions.
Do I understand that staff is insistent that you install more fencing around your property?
No, it was in May when I put the fencing around her. We were already experiencing these random charges through the south side of the property, so I fenced across the south property line in May, I believe.
Is there any gate at the entrance to either side of your driveway, your roof driveway?
The driveways are the only place where I have not yet fenced or blocked off.
I have no further questions.
Did you have any?
None, Your
You
Honor.
may sit down. Any further witnesses?
Yes, I will call Lynn.
Please come forward. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead and have a seat. And ma'am, you're gonna have to speak up very loud, okay?
Okay.
Would you state your name and then spell it?
My name is Ling Ling. First name L-I-N-G and last name is L-I-N.
You are not originally from the United States, is that correct?
Yes, I came from Taiwan. I've been living in Iowa for 7.5 years now.
And do you have any employment or any job outside of your household?
No,
Are you married to Mark Straka?
yes,
How long have you been married to Mark?
14 years.
Are you now a U.S. citizen as of recently?
Yes, last year.
And did you have to learn English to be a U.S. citizen?
Yes,
Is your original language not English?
no,
So-
Chinese.
So do you have some trouble speaking English? I think you do very well. But if I ask a question and you don't understand, will you say I don't understand?
Yes,
Okay. Now you are married to Mark, correct?
yes,
Do you and Mark live on an acreage outside of Sac City?
yes.
About 2 acres?
Uh-huh.
And Ling, do you raise any type of animals on the acreage?
I raised chickens since 2010. And the cats, we have cats.
You have cats and chickens on your acreage?
Yes.
And is there also an orchard?
Yeah, we have an orchard almost all around our property, and I have a little garden, and we raise chickens.
Do you recall the afternoon of July 3rd, 2014?
Yes.
What were you doing that afternoon?
We thought outside a beautiful day and quiet, so we let our chickens and cats out, and I was taking care of my chickens, and I heard on the road a very loud, angry voice, some girls shouting at their dogs.
How could you tell it was girls shouting at dogs?
It's a girl's voice, very high pitched, and a loud noise. It caught my attention, so I dropped what I was doing and went out to look.
And when you went out to look, what did you see?
I didn't really see what's going on, but I heard the yelling, and I saw marks like our house door.
Mark was at the door.
Yeah, he was standing by the house door.
Did you see any dogs?
They ran away.
So you did not see them at that time?
Yes, but I asked Mark what happened. He said a dog came in our driveway.
Have you ever had any problems with these dogs before?
Yes, they are particularly aggressive to us. Their dog chased our car when we passed by their house. They lunged and barked toward to our cars, and we passed by, drove by their house, and they were barking, charging toward to us when we go to our mailbox, and sometimes even we go out to take care of our trash, and they raiding into our yard many times.
So have you seen the dogs on your property coming into your yard?
Yes.
Do they get all the way into your yard?
Yes, running around wildly, unleashed.
And how close to the house do they get?
It's just by the driveway, or sometimes in this side yard, or sometimes in house they a little bit toward to our orchard, that part.
That they come all the way onto your property?
Yes, just right by our house, we can see out from our windows.
On the day of the incident, July 3rd,
Yes.
you did not see the dogs, you just heard them.
I heard them yelling, and I heard a dog barking.
And when you came around from the garden,
Uh-huh.
so you could see, did you see any people?
Yes, they are on a horseback, riding a horse.
And were they riding away at that time?
Yes.
So you did not talk to the people?
No, I didn't talk to the people.
Did you see any dogs at that time?
I saw them run away.
So the dogs were running away.
Yes,
Were they going toward their house?
yes. I heard a voice even before they come closer to our house, very loudly on the road. That's what caught my attention, and so I came out to look. They are very angry, yell at their dog. It sounds to me like they are yelling at the dog not obeying their order.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Smith,
Nothing around.
I think you stepped in. You stepped in. Mr. Schulte, did you have any further questions?
No, you're understood. No further evidence against us.
All right. Mr. Smith, did you have any closing arguments to make?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Schulte?
Well, my closing statement, Your Honor, is that, I move for acquittal both at the end of the state's evidence and at the end of all the evidence on the ground that the actual statute has not been proven to be violated beyond a reasonable doubt. First of all, a person is guilty of animal abuse if he intentionally injures, maims, disfigures, or destroys. No evidence of maiming, disfiguring, or destroying. Injury, it doesn't say anything. It doesn't say whether it's serious injury, bodily injury, whether it's permanent injury. I'd say that's very vague. But basically, the statute also goes on to say that none of that really applies if a person is acting to protect from injury, or if a person is acting to protect a person from injury or death caused by a wild animal, or if a person reasonably acting to protect the person's property from damage caused by an unconfined animal. I think the evidence is clear this animal was obviously unconfined. and I think they were reasonable in fearing for themselves and their property, and I asked for a stay on this ground.
All right, gentlemen, I will consider the case submitted. I'll prepare my ruling. I'm guessing I'll have it done in the next 2 weeks. I am back here 2 weeks from today's date, so once I get my ruling issued, it does have to be announced in open court. Mr. Schulte, with my findings of fact made in open court. However, the defendant may waive that,
Waive that.
and I would issue a ruling in writing. Is your client prepared to make any decision regarding that?
Yes, Your Honor, we would waive the reappearance in open court and hear the verdict and ask that it be rendered in writing.
Right, Mr. Straka, what we're talking about is you have the absolute right to come back into court once I've prepared my ruling, and at that time, I would read into the record my findings of fact and issue my ruling at that time. You also have the right to waive that, and I could do my entire findings and ruling in writing. Do you understand
I
that?
do, and having it in writing would be fine.
Right. Do you have any objection to that, Mr.
No, Your Honor.
All right, again, I assume I'll have the written ruling filed within the next 2 weeks. Anything further on behalf of the state?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Schulte?
No, Your Honor.
All right, court's in recess.